Okay, everybody, thanks for coming back to the Xanadu Review. As always, my name is Prester John Andrews, but you can just call me PJ. Well, today with me, I have one of my favorite writers here on Substack. We have Peter James. Um, Peter, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your blog, Diary of a Failed Comedian, and we'll kind of jump into it?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Really happy to be here. This is actually my first podcast in like nearly 2 years since I quit doing comedy. So gonna shake off the rust a little bit
Hmm.
and get back on the mic. But
I believe in you.
yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I was a stand-up comedian for 15 years, 3 years in DC, 12 years in New York City, trying to make a living at it. Pushed about as hard as I could during that time period, and eventually got to a point where I got really burnt out. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. Was what I was getting out of it was not worth what I was putting into it, which was a lot. So I made the decision to kind of leave it behind and give it up and move on. And that's kind of the main focus of what my Substack's about, is just like how it feels not just to follow your dreams, but to follow your dreams and fail at them, and just kind of what comes next and what you can kind of take from that experience and carry forward into your life.
Well, I think that's a really succinct way of putting it. Now, that's part of why I enjoy your writing, because I think it's very common for people in your position to get overly bitter and, like, blame X, Y, or Z external factors. And I'm sure we'll get into it in a second. But you had a very sober and interesting and kind of like in a way inspiring way of talking about that. Um, so I guess as a framing device, I would first of all say, everybody, if you're not subscribed to Peter, go ahead and do it. Um, and he has a really interesting piece about this where he goes into detail of why you gave up being a stand-up comedian. But I don't know, do you want to like jump, like what's the Cliff Notes version for my audience who's not aware of you? Like what made you decide to call it quits? Because I've been there too, like not that specifically. Like, when I was younger, I tried to be in bands, or I was in the tech world for last 6 or 7 years, and I just kind of burnt out on the high level stuff. And now I'm basically, I work at a small company. I'm what some people call like a tech janitor. Like, I'm just like the IT guy who resets passwords and, like, will get you a new charger, and I'm pretty happy with that. I'm not trying to make it in Silicon Valley or anything like that. So what's your story with that?
I mean, I always wanted to be a comedian ever since I was little, like watching Seinfeld in like third or fourth grade and just seeing those bits at the beginning and end of each episode. Just you kind of know, like it's like what rings your tuning fork in your chest, something like really
Hmm.
stands out to you, and like it's like your future self calling out to you. So like right after college, one of the first things I did was buy a notebook and start writing stuff down. Like to kind of get into like there's always a reason behind the reason, right? Of like kind of what you're doing it
Hmm.
for. Like in my lowest moments, it was really a way to try and control the way people perceived me, and like trying to like kind of get out ahead of like what people thought of me and like shape perceptions and do all that. But in my highest moments, when I was kind of doing it for the right reasons, it's because I was pursuing a sense of agency in my life. That was kind of my whole goal with becoming a full-time comedian that didn't need a day job. I wanted to be able to wake up and set the terms of my day as I saw fit, right? And that's what I was looking for. That's what I was chasing. That's what I was pursuing in comedy for so many years. And it eventually got to a point where, I got so beaten down, so frustrated, just kind of constantly banging my head against the wall, that it didn't really feel like comedy was helping me achieve agency. It was actually taking it away from me, because I felt obligated to do certain things. When I didn't do certain things, I would feel guilty. I couldn't enjoy time off. It was like just making my life on the whole more difficult without that payoff that I was looking for. And I just kind of got to a point, it was at the end of 2022. I was like sitting in the back of a comedy club and just like waiting to go up after midnight in front of like 8 people. And I'm just, I had been married for a few years at that point. My wife and I talked about starting a family, and I'm like, I can't like keep living like this, like well into my 30s. And also, if I have a family, like I'm not going to be the guy like at the comedy club doing the shitty spot with my kids at home. I just can't live like that. So I gave it like one more year, just like pushed as hard as I could just to take like one last hard crack at it. And yeah, didn't really move the needle enough. And quietly and just very assuredly gave it up at the end of 2023, and haven't looked back, haven't regretted it one bit, honestly.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's something that's on one level I definitely feel a lot of empathy for, because I've been in those situations where, like, you're trying so hard at something and it for whatever reason it just doesn't work out like that. But I also really appreciated how sober and thoughtful you were about it. And I think, like, you're clearly somebody with an interesting perspective, as is evidenced by, you have a decent and growing audience on Substack, and you have really interesting thought pieces, especially because, as you probably know, you and the audience in general, it's very easy, especially in the Substack atmosphere, especially in the last couple of years, to easily fall into one groove or the other, one narrative the other. And I appreciate that you avoid those really easy cliched narratives that it's easy to fall into, right? And those are the type of people I like to have on the podcast. So I guess one of the pieces that, the first piece that really made me take notice of you was your piece on religion and going back to church. But I want to save that for a little bit later, because I think we kind of run in similar circles as well. There's a lot of people I talk to have had on that we run in the same circles. You start seeing each other's posts more and more. And
yeah, we're in the same algorithms.
Yeah, we're in at least one group chat together, I believe. I don't jump in those quite as often as maybe I should. But leading up to this, I reread a couple of your pieces, or I guess in my case, listened to them because I have a long ass commute. But your piece on Bill Burr, I found really interesting, because Bill Burr is one of those people who I used to like, and then I kind of burnt out on him because I thought he was just like, okay, he's kind of like somebody like Lewis Black, or what's his face, Mark Maron, or what's the guy?
Mario Cantone's a guy that yells a lot. Like, yeah,
whoever, who's somebody who, like, their whole thing is like, let me rage out. It's like, all right, I get it. He, like, Bill Burr had that legendary piece where I think he was in like Boston or
Philadelphia.
Or
yeah, the Philly rant. Yeah. Do you know, like, the backstory to that?
I know that everybody. I'll let you tell him, because you'll tell it better than I have, just for context for Bill Burr.
Yeah. So Burr at that point was like just kind of a unknown touring headlining comedian. This is like mid 2000s, maybe like 2005. He was really big in like the Opie and Anthony circuit, but he wasn't like a nationally renowned comedian like he is now. And there was like a tour of comedians. It was like him, Patrice O'Neal, Bobby Kelly, I think a couple guys from Opie and Anthony, but like they're doing this tour around the country, and then they're just getting like, everyone's getting booed at this show in Philly. And it's just like one after the other. Like, for some reason, the crowd is just completely against them. And Burr just goes out there, and for 15 minutes, he just like trashes the entire city, trashes their sports teams, trashes their culture. Because like he knew, like, if I go out there and do bits, I'm going to fall flat. So at least I'm going to go down swinging, right? And that ended up like going viral, and it was like one of his first like really big pops.
Because the crowd turns around. Is the
they love him for it, because people in Philly, they're out of their minds,
Mm-hmm.
So if they're getting it back, at least they'll respect you for it, and they'll give you your due.
Certain cities like that, Philadelphia or New Jersey or Detroit, or like, I'm from Milwaukee. It's a little bit like that. Like, it has a bad reputation, and if you either if you can't roll with the punches, or if you pander, like, you're going to get eaten alive. And to me, because that's when I first found Bill Burr, because to me that was like one of the funniest things I've ever seen, but also just like something for the record books as far as stand-up comedy, of like being able, like, the crowd just fucking hates you, and you're able to turn it around on them by like abusing them.
Yeah, and he was doing a countdown too, because like they, how much time he had left in his set. He's like, 5 minutes left, and I will be selling my CD after the show. And so like the countdown part was like a recurring thing that kept like bringing the crowd back into it. It was almost like a callback every minute.
Yeah, so that was so good. But because I was really into stand-up comedy back in the day, and I actually, for a little while, I had dreams of stand-up comedy myself, as many young men did at the time.
Of course.
I don't think I was really cut out for it, probably, I'm probably just not quite funny enough. I'm one of those people, like, I'm funny in the context of my friends and I can get some laughs. I did a stand-up comedy, like, open mic night once, and I got some laughs out. I was like, I kind of got what I wanted to out of this.
Yeah.
Let's just, it's kind of like when I first turned 18 or 21 or whatever you need to be to gamble, I bought a scratch off, and I was like, oh, I bought one and I won like $7 of profit. I was like, I'm gonna call it. I'm
Go out a winner.
Yeah, world champion gambler, 100% profit. It's like I got some laughs. I'll call it. But all that to say, because to me, Bill Burr was somebody who's like, yep, I get it. You rage out. I get it. I can only take so much of it. Somebody like Mark Maron, I think, is he's not funny enough to justify how bitter he is. And I think Bill Burr was funny enough, but you kind of get the idea. And then I rediscovered him a couple years ago. Did you ever see the show F is for Family that he did?
Yeah, I love that show.
Yeah, it's so good. I was like, okay, let me give this another chance. And you start to see not only how funny he is, but just a level of emotional maturity that you don't really see in comedians specifically, but art in general. So, and you wrote a piece that kind of touched on that. So if you want to talk about it a little bit and dig into it a little bit.
Yeah, honestly, I didn't even bring up F is for Family when I was writing that piece just because I focused on his stand-up material, but I do feel like that show is almost like the key to who he really is, because you're right, he does have this perception of being this like angry, ragey kind of guy, but I think deep down he is very like sensitive and like feels a lot. If you watch the show, like the little redhead kid is called Billy, and he's like a huge pussy and just like a coward and scared of everything, and I think that's Bill kind of showing who he was as a kid. And through the dysfunctional environment that he grew up in, eventually like kind of becomes this like angry guy that we know so well on stage, right? But like that's kind of the whole journey that I touched on in that essay, was just like he was known as an angry guy, but he was like trying his hardest to figure out why and to release the anger. Like his second special is literally called Let It Go, right? But he just like couldn't do it for whatever reason. Every special he was still angry, still talking about blowing up at his then girlfriend, now wife, getting into fights with people, like the things that riled him up, and he talks about like wanting to become a more easygoing person, and he just can't do it for whatever reason. And this goes on for like 5 or 6 specials. It's like it's really kind of, he's beating his head against the wall, really.
Mm-hmm.
Like the turning point hits in 2022's Live at Red Rocks, where he talks about doing mushrooms out in the desert and just having this realization of like, the way he describes it is he's having a good time for like the first hour of the trip, and then all of a sudden he gets hit with this feeling of just like profound loneliness and not feeling loved. And it's just like this deep, dark thing that he can't get out of. So he's having a real bad trip, and he's trying to get out of it. And he's like, all right, like think about your kids. Like I love my kids love me. That always makes me feel good. And that still wouldn't pull him out of it. He goes, all right, wait, this isn't real. Like what is this? What's going on? And it just hits him. He goes, oh, this is how I felt growing up. So he's been like avoiding that feeling for 30, 40 years, but it's still been sitting in his chest that entire time, right? And it takes the mushroom trip to like really bring it out of him and make him confront it, right? So he like the part of that special that I really love about the mushroom trip, it's like a 30-minute arc about doing mushrooms, reflecting on his childhood, and then taking that and applying it to how he raises his kids. To me, it's like it's the platonic ideal of what I personally want stand-up to be, in that it's like personal and revealing, but it's also funny the entire way through. And that's something that he really nails, in that he can get deep, but there's never a punchline far away.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a handful of comedians who are able to do that. I think Mike Birbiglia is none of those people who I feel, at least to me, is able to walk that line between like still being funny and weaving a narrative, and saying something a little bit more. Because and I want to get to this in a little bit. There's like very much the age of like clapter, or like it's more like performance art than even comedy. Like, the two ends of the pole that make me think of are, what's her face? Hannah Gatsby.
Nanette, yeah. Nanette's actually not bad. The first half hour of Nanette is funny. Like it's all punchlines, and then she like flips it, and then it gets serious, and then it turns into a one-woman show.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to. I've seen clips, and maybe clips don't do it justice. And I've heard like clips of her comedy that I thought was it's like really middle of the road Reddit type shit. But
It is.
the other
It's
end,
been a while since I've seen it. So yeah, it might.
yeah,
I might have a different opinion on it now than a few
yeah,
years ago.
well, and again, like it's one of those things where I feel like, much in the way, and I've told people, and this is, to spoil what I was going to say. The other example, maybe a more culturally conservative end of the pole of Dave Chappelle is like, okay, if you're getting offended at what Dave Chappelle is saying out of context, a 30-second clip, it makes more sense like as a joke in the context of a stand-up comedy show. But that having been said, and you touched on this in another piece that I want to talk about as well, that like Dave Chappelle has done like his own version of Clapter, where he's doing not right wing, like he's doing like these
It's like provocation, basically. Like,
these one-man shows. And like, I mean, it's one of those things where like, okay, I get where you're coming from, but like he had this one where like this 10-minute thing about how like, he got screwed out of royalties for a Chappelle show, and that was like slavery. It's like,
yeah, dude,
come
I'm
on,
not. I
man.
don't feel the same way. I don't feel bad for anything that happens to Pete Davidson. Like, I don't feel bad for anything that happens to Dave Chappelle. Like, you're one of the greatest comedians of all time. You're
Multi-millionaire.
universally beloved. Like, you're nitpicking to the utmost degree. And like, again, like I always feel like whenever I have this conversation with people, I always have to preface it with like, I love Chappelle. He's easily my top 5. He's got like 2 or 3 of the best specials ever. Like, but like I just had enough of his like persecution complex that he was kind of on a run with, where it's like he makes some
like
LGBT.
5 years.
Yeah, but he made some LGBT jokes in a couple specials, whether it was like Bird Revelation or Sticks and Stones, and there was some backlash to it. And then he spends the next, and the jokes were funny. They were completely in line in my opinion. And then he spends the next like 3 specials complaining about the backlash. And it's just like, this isn't what I want to hear from you. Like, you're allowed to talk about whatever you want, certainly, but it's like, I'm not personally interested. I did think his recent monologue on SNL was funny. Like, it seemed to be moving back to kind of that more classic Chappelle, where it's like insightful but goofy at the same time. He was talking about Reginald Vell Johnson at the P. Diddy freak-offs. And just the way he says stuff like Carl Winslow from Family Matters, like it just tickles my funny bone to no end, dude. So it's like, again,
I mean, he's one of the best for a reason.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of those things where like, it makes me think of, I think, it was Whitney Cummings, and I think Tim Dillon was on with her, and she was talking like, I do a podcast, but I do an hour or 2. I can't do multiple hours because people don't want to hear a woman talk that long. It's like, lady, you are one of the most successful comedians and podcasters of our generation. Get the fuck out of here. She had a network
TV show. Yeah.
Same thing with Dave Chappelle. Dude, get the fuck out of here with your persecution complex. You're a multimillionaire. You could go to basically anywhere in the world and people will hear you talk. Don't talk to me about how you're persecuted and silenced.
And I'm sure like maybe a counter argument that he would give is like, he's not doing it for himself. He's doing it for comedians that don't have a bunch of money and have a name. Like, he's trying to clear the path for them because he can kind of take the heat. And like, I get that. It just like, it doesn't make for a good comedy special, in my opinion.
Agreed. And I think, and I guess this is a good transition, and I'll let you do the exact quote, but I think you said something to the effect of a lot of these like anti-woke or whatever you want to call it, more right-leaning comedians, like after they say, nobody can say anything anymore, they have nothing to say. Like, what was the exact quote you had? Was that
I think that was pretty much it. Yeah. And like, nobody, you can't say anything anymore. Like that was like applicable like during the Trump years, basically the Trump 1 years. And like, even then it was like kind of hack, but like there was like cultural pressure and cultural blowback. But like now it's at a point where like they're kind of fighting a ghost. You know what I mean? Like in the same way that like Whitney Cummings would say nobody wants to hear a woman talk. It's like sometimes she like needs that kind of pushback to have a point of view. So like with these more right-leaning comedians where it's like, oh, woke's gone crazy. It's like, nah, dude, like we've won, like it's over. You know what I mean? Like, or I shouldn't say over, but it's like the right and like kind of the
cultural hegemony, maybe.
Yeah. But like what was like heterodox a few years ago is like kind of back in the mainstream and is like okay again, so you don't have to like fight the last presidential terms battle, so to speak.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if you're a history buff, but if you've probably, even if you're not, heard of like these Japanese
The
soldiers,
Japanese soldiers,
yeah, who
yeah,
were
yeah.
fighting until the 70s. But it's like
Yeah,
both
except that
sides.
these comedians
Yeah,
know the war is over, or at least they're living in the environment that tells them the war is over.
yeah. So I guess I'm curious, and I'll say this as a preface because you mentioned this in one of your articles about not liking the terms woke and or cancel culture. However, I think it speaks to a very real phenomenon. And if you say that, people know exactly what you mean. And then people can make a value judgment whether or not that was good or bad or over or under exaggerated. Um, so if I'm understanding your position on that correctly, just as
Yeah,
a
I mean, like
preface.
it's basically like a shorthand. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
because when I hear woke, when I hear cancel culture, I think the line I used in the essay was like, you say it, you always sound like an aggrieved boomer, you know? And
yeah,
it's like there's that kind of position you don't really want to take, but it's like it's just a phrase and words that people understand automatically. You know, it's easier
yeah.
to say than like cultural Marxism.
Or which also sounds very PragerU. But
Yeah.
all that to say, um, I'm curious to what it was like for you on the ground, because you were in the trenches, so to speak, in the New York comedy scene as this stuff was coming up. Because at least to me, as a civilian, so to speak, it felt like it was, like somebody like Jimmy Kimmel is the best example, who was doing like the man show, is like, how many hot dogs can we fit in this prostitute's pussy,
Yeah.
and then like a couple
Carl
years
Malone
later,
blackface, like that was one of
yeah,
his
or
bits. Yeah.
Sarah Silverman literally doing blackface and going on some TV show and like defending, saying the word chink. And a couple years later, both of these people are, Peter, what's his face? Jimmy Kimmel's literally like crying on national TV about Trump. And yeah, Sarah Silverman is like super woke, which to be fair, like if you come by those worldviews, honestly, like I have a lot of sympathy for that left worldview because I was more of I was of the brethren of Bernard, as they say.
Mhm.
Um, but for somebody like that, it feels very disingenuous. Like if you're saying racial slurs and
Opportunistic.
doing,
Like
yeah, well,
you're
racial
just going
slurs and
where the money
blackface.
is or where the tide is,
So
basically.
what was it like on the ground? Because to me as a civilian, so to speak, it felt very, very abrupt. And I feel like maybe that's part of where the backlash, even from normal people, came from. Because I think there's always going to be committed partisans on either side. But even like a lot of normal people are like, okay, I was with you up until X point, but around the Trump era is where like things got out of hand.
Yeah, I mean, like on the ground, there certainly was a shift in terms of what people felt comfortable talking about, what people felt comfortable saying. I'm trying to figure out like the best way to phrase this because I want to speak to the reality, but while also like not sounding like I'm complaining about it. It's like no one really was like checking for straight white guys in comedy during that. It was an overcorrection back the other way during that time. But I never wanted to use that as an excuse as to like why I wasn't getting booked. For me, the answer was always like get funnier, get funnier. Even if I'm gonna sit here and complain about I'm not getting booked because of X, Y, and Z, like because this person is this fits this category and checks this box and I don't, like I'm wasting time and I'm wasting energy and I'm wasting like just my thought process, So like while it was a reality, I tried not to like spend too much time thinking about it. And like there were guys like me in that era who made it big, like the Cumtown guys all blew up huge during that era, and they certainly didn't fall into any of those boxes. So it's just kind of a matter of like finding your zone and like your niche and your crowd and the people that would be into you. You can't like point to some nebulous cultural force as to the reason why you didn't make it. And I tried to never fall into that trap.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's it's interesting that you bring up Cumtown because I feel like they are, I don't know. And again, would you say they're the exception that proved the rule, or was it a part of something large? Because them, like Chapo Trap House, is very comedy adjacent to me. Like I discovered Cumtown probably around when the pandemic hit because I never want to say I was full woke, but probably a lot more in the the left-wing cultural sphere. It's like, wokeness, it's kind of annoying, but it's something you put up with because it's more on your side than not on your side. But then the pandemic happened. I was like, um, something kind of broke in me mentally and emotional. I was like, it just felt good to have like some crass humor. And like, to me, it was like, okay, my, for better or for worse, I don't know how ideologically coherent this is. Like, okay, I'll respect trans pronouns, but I'm going to admit that it's fun to say gay and retarded, And I feel like that was a lane that existed,
And yeah, that was like the lane they filled, certainly. But like, I think with them, so to go back to your point about just feeling something break in you, I think what it is, and I certainly felt this too, even though I never would have like qualified myself as like left leaning or woke, is like just you get so tired of like the digital panopticon, like the surveillance state of like kind of everyone watching what everyone else says and like being willing to report somebody or like call somebody out because they use the wrong phrase or whatever. Like that just gets exhausting because you're constantly in a state of tension and like self-observance, and it's just like it's no way to live. So I think that's part of the reason why like everyone's like we've passed peak woke, so to speak, and like everyone's kind of seemed to let it go. I think people are just burnt out and tired of the game itself. And when it comes to like the Cumptown guys, I think it's just because like they are just truly better, like funnier. Like I think Nick is one of the funniest people on the planet.
Oh, I would agree.
He's like a demented mad genius. Stav is like such a hilarious character. Adam fits into that kind of group so perfectly, and it's like they were
Hyde
so
until fairly recently was in that category. He's kind of gone off the rails a little bit recently to me.
Yeah, he's getting his Tucker Carlson on and just doing his little radio show.
And I can't tell if he's doing a bit or not, honestly. What as a professional or a retired professional, like is it like an elaborate thing like he did with because to me, like one of the funniest things ever, not unlike Bill Burr's thing in Philadelphia, Sam Hyde's TED Talk was like one of the funniest things ever. Is like his hardcore, talking about various, ethnic groups and whatnot. Is this a bit, or has he just like drank his own Kool-Aid too much?
I don't know. So I haven't seen that one. Maybe I need to like go back and check that out. But the stuff I have seen of Sam like recently too, like after the whole like H1B debacle over Christmas and like kind of what he had to say about Vivek and Elon, like to me it reads like professional wrestling almost, where he's like he is himself, but he's just taking the dial on his personality and kind of turning it all the way up, but it reads as like at the foundation authentic to me.
Which I guess to a certain degree, I would imagine that's what everybody does when you're in these media spaces. And even in the small capacity that I exist in this world as like a Substack writer and podcaster, like there's parts of myself that I turn up and there's parts of myself that I turn down because I want to keep certain aspects of myself, my personality, and my life private, and I'll turn up other parts. So it's an interesting conversation, but as a very slight side note before we get too far away from it, and this is maybe, too inside baseball, but did you happen to see that Bill Burr like said that it came out that he was Billy Corgan of the Smashing Pumpkins' half brother?
Is that for real, or was that just like
that's what I was asking you? Like I can't tell because Billy Corgan is another of those people who had like a very like outsized media presence, and he would like play these things up. And right now he literally like his other thing when he's not a musician is he owns a professional wrestling company. I can't tell if this is literally
sounds
true.
like a work to me to use
that was my thought. Like they're just both bald white guys of a similar age. Like
with a beard, like, and Billy's a little fatter. Billy Corgan is like
but to that point, I guess we've touched on it a little bit. There's been a lot of talk about the vibe shift. Personally, I feel like it's maybe a little bit overstated. But that having been said, I do sometimes wonder. I forget the guest I had on, and we talked about potentially trading blue-haired scolds for red-headed MAGA hat scolds, and to the degree to which the vibe shift is overstated. Or like where you see culture going, because you had a really great piece about Elon Musk and how like he tries way too hard to be funny when he's not. He's kind of a cringe Reddit nerd guy.
Yeah.
Whereas Donald Trump, like, and I say this as somebody who didn't vote for him, and so far has been unimpressed with his second term as of the recording of this podcast on June 26th. He is fucking hilarious. Like, even way back in the day, like the Hillary Clinton being so, not unlike that when you wrote that piece, it made me think of Hillary Clinton because she was trying to be charismatic. It's like, Donald, if I was president, you would be in jail. And without missing a beat, perfect comedic timing. He'd be like, because you'd be in jail.
Yeah, dude, he's got so many bangers like that. Like there was one, this is so underrated too. I think it was in like the second or third. It was in the second debate because Trump got all the laughs in the first one with Hillary, right? And so like it kind of read that way. It's, oh man, like he crushed out on the debate floor. And then this, like she starts trying to be funny, she was like, just in her Hillary voice, like, well, like he always says if he loses, it's rigged. If the election doesn't go his way, it's rigged. Even when he lost the Emmy for The Apprentice, he said it was rigged. And she like had like this little smirk on her face, like, ooh, I got him. And like he just leans into the mic and goes, should have gotten it. just and the whole crowd erupts and then she's
so
like,
funny.
No, he's got like perfect instincts for like comedic timing. And then the whole thing about even the first GOP primary debate where Megyn Kelly's like, you've called women fat, disgusting, slobs, and he leans in and he goes, only Rosie O'Donnell, and just
even
it's like Cat Williams, like like in a theater in Atlanta, just the whole thing just explodes.
And just recently, and keep him. This is going to be released a little bit after it's recorded. So if we're in World War III, apologies on my behalf of myself and Peter, but like he had this press release about the Iran bomb, and he was like obviously mad. And he's like, Israel, Iran, they have no fucking idea what they're doing.
They don't know what the fuck they're doing. And it's what's funny about him is like, it's not just that he says funny things, but he creates these moments that become memes. Like I've seen so many different memes that it's like, setting up a scenario, then it's like the way you respond, and the video is Trump going, they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Like it just, he's got so many countless moments like that, and it's why he's been so indestructible for the last 10 years. He's just in the zeitgeist, in the culture. It's like it's beyond just being a politician. He just is the guy of the moment.
I feel like anytime there, any president, even Donald Trump, who is, allegedly a little bit more real than, other politicians, which I think it's a different type of fakeness, but that's neither here nor there.
He's honestly hyperbolic. Like, what you're getting with him, and he just goes over the top.
And he's a media bullshitter from way back, which is, it's its own type of fakeness, but it's also a real.
He used to call up the New York Post with like fake gossip lines about him. Like he would pretend to be some publicist. Oh, I saw Donald Trump at this club last night. He knows the machine. He knows how to work it.
And he is very good at that. But like I feel like there is moments where presidents will reveal a little bit of their true selves. Like for me, like a couple of them are like George Bush's, like he's like, we have to defeat the axis of evil. Now watch this drive.
Hell yeah.
And like he hits the golf ball, gets in the golf cart, puts his feet up and drives away. Like, all right, this guy's an idiot frat boy. Obama
he did not want to be president. He just wanted his dad to love him. Like, and like that was the quickest way to his dad's heart.
Many such cases as we as to use a Trumpism. Obama is a little bit harder, and I'm curious if you have one for this. And this is maybe putting you on a spot, but to me, it's. Do you remember when he did Between Two Ferns with Zach Galifianakis?
Yeah, he was like kind of a dick. Like that it was the character was kind of a dick. Like he was able to give it back to Zach.
And he made like,
a lot of it that way, but
a joke about like, Zach Galifianakis made some joke about it. It's like, I can have you killed, right? And to me, that was like, because Obama was so cool and calm, like Obama was a killer. Obama was like a very smooth operator. I don't know. Do you?
No, I think there was some rage under there. Certainly, like he smoked cigarettes. Like he was trying to quiet something in his chest. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I think there was definitely like an anger and an explosiveness that he knew how to manage and how to like channel into his work and like what he did. I think that example you call up does seem like a little bit of a window into that. But again, he's too composed to let that go in a normal situation.
Yeah. So, and for me, like Trump's is the infamous / famous Tiny Dancer moment where he learns about the death of Ruth Bader
telling me for the first time.
Yeah. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And, he's like, oh, I'm just fine. He finds out that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has died. He's like, I'm just finding out that, say what you will. She lived an amazing life.
The finger up to the ear is also just like, that's a meme. It's just like, it's so nonstop, funny. Man. Yeah.
And for Biden, I don't quite know. Cause like he was very buttoned up, but for him it was like letting the air out of a balloon.
Yeah, I
Slowly,
don't know
like,
if there's anything going on behind, especially as the term went on. Like,
yeah, it was banana
lights
pudding.
are on, nobody's home, man. Unfortunately.
Other than like, there are some moments where like I genuinely felt bad for Biden. Like,
Oh
is
no,
this
it
elder
was
abuse?
awful. Like I know it was elder abuse, and it was just so.
He
I
doesn't know
mean,
what's
like
going on half the
I
time.
know. The thing is, like, I try not to get like too like anytime I do get political in my writing, I just like kind of talk about the intersection of like comedy and politics. I kind of like talk around it. Because I think there are people that do it way better than me and have like a much like clearer point of view. But like I can get really riled up when the subject arises. It's like it just drives me crazy how he was so clearly falling apart the beginning of 2024, and the whole media response was like, "What are you talking about? He looks great." If you say he's doing
sharp
bad,
as attack. That's
he's
the
doing
phrase.
bad, you're a fascist, and you want Trump to win, and you don't support democracy. So what do you think about that? It's just like that irks me to no end, and I don't know if I'll ever stop being upset about that.
Yeah, that was one of those things where, like, I remember like getting into like fights with my in-laws over it. I was like, are you fucking serious? Like, this guy's his brain is vanilla pudding. What are you talking about?
And then they faked it until they couldn't fake it anymore at the debate, which I don't know if they put him out there on purpose just to like make it just to get rid of him. But it's either way, it was so fucked.
Tell me about the rabbits, Joe.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is actually a good transition to another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, and it is, broadly speaking, because it feels like, at least to me, I don't know if you follow Catherine D. She wrote about how people talk about culture being stuck, but it feels like, and she agreed that there's a lot of stuff, or she rather stated that there's a lot of stuff boiling under the surface. But at least to me, like, it feels like the two poles of the ridiculousness of, Joe Biden, just completely like, him being a deflating balloon, or Kamala Harris being like this, the dumbest, drunkest woman in America, or like we have to pretend that like Donald Trump has something coherent to say, that he's like this once in a generation statesman, or even on the cultural sides of like, Whitney Cummings, like, being one of the most famous and successful comedians in crying sexism, or Dave Chappelle also being one of the most famous and successful comedians, and like, racism, and or paradoxical, like, the woke are trying to keep me down. So it feels like, and I've noticed this and talked to other people with this, it feels like we're at this caught moment of like the old definitely being done, and we're just, getting the last couple drops out of what was in the past of culture. And, we're on the cusp of something new, but we don't quite know what that is yet. And I'm curious to what your thoughts on what that's going to be.
I mean, yeah, I think culture is stuck. Things are repetitive, rehashed, recycled. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of unique ideas out there in the wider culture. I think that's a result of like just the totality of like the algorithmic learning model experience that like everything's kind of built around now, where it's like there's nothing new that's generated. It's just like based off of previous inputs that have already come in, right? And that's like kind of how our whole that's like our entire frame of reference. We can only go back to things or like pull from things that already existed. We can't like kind of create anything new. And like there's kind of this debate on the right about like, conservatism versus resurrectionism, and like conservatism is like kind of keeping things the same, whereas like resurrectionism is like bringing back like what's always been true, but like in kind of new and vital and unique ways. That was something Jonathan Kieperman talked about on Ross Douthat's like New York Times podcast. It's like, so there's two ways to look at it, where it's like you can kind of go back to what's existed over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years and just try and rehash it as much as possible till you wring every last dollar out of it, and there's nothing but just like an empty, useless husk. Or you can like try and go back and get to the spirit of something and create something new centered around that spirit. It's like the reason the new Star Wars movies suck is because they're just like shitty movies with a Star Wars skin over the top of it. Like it has like the look of Star Wars. It has like the signifiers, the names, the reference points, but it doesn't have the spirit and the soul, that kind of timeless hero's journey, archetypal Carl Jung thing that just like made it work so well in the first place. Like that's been lost. So if there's anything new coming forward, it's gonna require a digging deeper beyond just the superficial aspects of what we've seen previously, and just getting to the essence or the spirit of what the thing is, and then building something new around that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because to me, that feels like, I would say, at least for me, and this is something maybe unpopular and or I harp on too much. I feel like when people talk about left or right, I feel like these are largely 19th and 20th century paradigms that don't really apply as much to our current moment. You're like, oh, we're in a right wing moment, left wing moment. It's the vibe shift. It's, we're gonna have a backlash against woke. Oh no, you're gonna provoke a backlash against the backlash, and woke become even more powerful. Like, at least to me, like, it feels like a lot of these things are, as I said, like, the last couple squirts of the ketchup bottle, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I feel
Gotta
like
put some water in there and shake it up if you're gonna get anything out of it.
and it's by nature watered down, and your hot dog is ruined if you get anything out. But it does feel like I'm starting to see, and I've heard the term perennialism, as you kind of mentioned, things that are deeper and a little bit more ancient. And that's kind of what I find interesting. It's not necessarily easy to put into a left-right paradigm, and kind of what I would like to see in the future, politically and culturally. What are your thoughts on that? Because that's what I would like to see, as somebody who, was more of a Bernie bro type, so to speak, for better or for worse, Chapo, come town, dirtbag left, but also, blue dog, Labor Democrat. And there are aspects of the dissident right or Trumpism that was appealing to me on its surface that's not really delivering on, or some of the cultural stuff. Because just for example, like, as you mentioned, like the Star Wars stuff, for example, is a skin suit, just not very good. Or some of the clapter that's, something that stands out to me is the Ron Swanson guy was, he did a stand-up special a little while back. Terribly unfunny, but it got rapturous applauses because he's just, saying liberal truisms in the cadence of Ron Swanson.
Right. So it's like they get to have a conservative character, but then he's like their mascot, essentially.
Well, I mean, I feel like that, and I don't want to get too much into this, but a lot of the Kamala Harris campaign was like, 30-something millennial women, like not Tim Kaine, the other one,
Tim Walz.
Yeah, of like, that's kind of how Ron Swanson was, like 30-something millennial liberal women writing like what they wish their dad was. And that's kind of what I saw with his comedy, is like, I think women are equal and should be treated as such. And oh my God, it's so great stuff. But at the same time, a lot of the stuff on the right has been even worse, like that Mr. Burcham show and basically anything the Daily Wire does. So I'm interested to see like what is next, what can be culturally relevant, and because you can do like propaganda if it is message forward, right or left, is especially in comedy, is categorically terrible to me. Like, you have to be funny, smart, interesting, and vital. And your message should be implicit. So, is there anything that you see as like early warning signs in the comedy world or culture, or are we just still on this precipice, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think so. On like a surface level, if you just look at things, just kind of left, right, politically, just kind of, we talk about like the 19th, 20th century, right? There does. And it might just be because X is more right leaning now, and that's kind of what I get served in my feed. But like, I think there is more humor. I see a lot of funny stuff on the right, and like a lot of great memes, a lot of great points, a lot of great jokes. And you can see it in, like, if you subscribe to Dudley New Wright's New Right post. I was going to say,
shout out to Dudley New Wright, who I think shared both of some of our recent articles.
Absolutely, yeah. Mm-hmm. But like, my favorite part is all the tweets at the end. It's just like I think there's so many great tweets that are like very right wing explicit. So I think there is room for right wing humor now. Yeah,
because like, to me, like, as a Bernie bro type, like some of that. All right, this is just funny. you
Yeah,
know? Whereas,
exactly.
you know,
And there's like elements to, but it has like a right wing flavor. I'm actually like writing something right now. It'll probably be out by the time this posts, but about tires, like the Shane Gillis
Mhm.
show on Netflix.
Mhm.
And there are elements of that show. It kind of reads as like right wing coded, just because it's like working class coded, and that's
Well,
kind of
he's an
where like.
interesting case in that sense, Shane
But
Gillis in general.
he walks the line where like he's not going to be one of those guys that's like, oh, you can't say anything anymore. I think his response to getting fired from SNL was like, yeah, that was supposed to happen. Like I'm not the kind of guy that should be on this kind of show.
Well,
But he knows how to play it down the middle while still like not pandering. You know what
and
I
I
mean?
think, at least to me, Shane Gillis, at the end of the day, I get the impression he's somebody like Louis C.K. who kind of pokes fun at the left side of the culture, but ultimately he's on that side. And maybe I'm completely wrong on that, but I think they're being able to walk that line and be able to speak to both sides, and not in a superficial sense. Maybe that's the future, and be able to speak to something deeper. I'm not quite sure.
Well, I think like what I wrote about this in like an earlier essay, but like I think part of the reason his Trump impression works so well is because you can tell that he spends time around Trump supporters and he knows what Trump supporters find funny about Trump. So he can like bring that to life. Whereas Alec Baldwin's impression is clearly just rooted in like a caricature that he has in his own mind of him.
Well, also he gives you such a great formula of to do a Trump impression. It's like Peter James. Wow, he's such a great comedian. He's one of the best writers on Substack. People silent say, "Wow, such great articles."
Yeah,
Like,
he does a
gives the
good one for
formula.
sure. Yeah.
I have to observe things and say, "Wow, great thing."
And then you just kind of do like the word salad at the end. But yeah, so there's that surface level part of it, and like, but I think like a deeper thing is what you touched on with like the perennialism, right? And like this is just a pet theory of mine, might sound completely insane, but it's kind of what I touched on in like my going back to church essay, where it's like I think we're kind of at an endpoint of, you know, the kind of scientific, rational, material revolution of the late 1800s, whenever it was that started. Like we thought we could break the world down into its component parts and like optimize it. Like that's kind of like the entire millennial experience. Like we're the first generation that had access to the tools and technology, but also the cultural permissiveness to be like, do whatever you want, optimize your life to the best of your ability, you know, be the perfect worker, the perfect, have the perfect dating life, have the perfect grocery card, have the perfect shopping experience, and you can use it all with technology. And it all makes perfect sense because the math adds up. Right. But we've ultimately and quickly found out that that was like just deeply, deeply hollow. And there's nothing really spiritually nourishing about that. Right. So like that's, I think this is why you see kind of this retreat back into more sort of subjective, enchanted kind of experiences. It's why you see religion kind of coming back on the rise, specifically Catholicism. Like I think people are starting to, maybe people have been saying this for the last 50 or 100 years and they've been wrong every time, but like I think people are starting to kind of be okay with like not having all the data and not being able to rationally explain everything and just being able to live based on feel. Like one of my favorite memes that I've seen recently is it's like someone was asking someone like, oh, do you have a source for that? And the person responds, it was revealed to me on my walk. And like that kind of
with
thing.
the Chad.
You know? Yeah, exactly. So it's like that's where I see things kind of shifting, is this retreat back into more subjective, enchanted experiences.
Well, I think that's a really good transition to the last thing I want to talk to you about, because your religion piece is what really made me take notice of you as somebody other than like, oh, Peter, he posts some funny stuff on the timeline sometimes. And just as a quick side note before we get past it, I think like, funnily enough, I think Shane Gillis getting kicked off of SNL was probably the best thing that ever happened to his career, because I've always said, and maybe you as a comedian, you could speak to this. Like if you're good, you will get you'll get invited on SNL. If you're really good, you will leave SNL. If you're great, you'll get kicked off. It's kind of like, you know, back
happened to Norm, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, exactly. You know, one of the greats, RIP, by the way. You know, back in the day, like, you know, if you got kicked off of MTV, then you got real street cred. But all that to say, so if you want to talk a little bit about your piece about going back to church, because that's what really resonated with me, because I had a number of experiences that weren't exactly the same but rhymed. For me, the the two experiences that really stood out was I went to what do you call it? Mount Rushmore with my in-laws, and like Mount Rushmore itself kind of sucked, honestly. Like it's a lot smaller than you think it is, for one. And it was during COVID, and funny enough, like
They had
Trump,
masks on the faces on the mountain.
yeah, and like it was either like the day before or the day, like Trump was there that weekend, so it was all full of MAGA boomers. And MAGA boomers, say what you will. Uh, but the thing that really struck me is there was this Lakota man who was there, who was talking about, and I wrote about this in experience in a piece that I have called "The Wedding Across and a Tiger," where I talked about re-enchantment that I feel a lot of people are experiencing, because I've written about this. Like my dad was a pastor. My grandfather was not a pastor, but very strongly in the church. My great grandfather was like a big tent revival pastor. On my dad's side of the family, like if you're in the Southern gospel world or country, you know songs that my family wrote. And it's like huge, like it's been in major motion pictures, Country Music Hall of Fame. But I was so against that for so much of my life. But recontextualizing that in the context of hearing about this Lakota man talking about his experience with his people and his life, and not seeing himself as just this disconnected biological node, but something that was connected to something perennial and something going back generations and generations and generations. And the other side of that was like about a year later, my little sister got married. And again, like my dad was a pastor, so I've been probably to more weddings than anybody outside of a wedding singer, just because of that, before the age of 18. And re-experiencing a wedding, and the phrase I've used, for a long time, the sacred became not profane but mundane. I'd seen it over and over and over again, but re-experiencing a new context of my sister, and seeing that between that, and the third thing was, and this is what made me think of when you talked about the movie The Norseman. I'll let you talk about that. Watching the movie The Life of Pi, and if you haven't seen that movie, but the audience hasn't, read my article, and also watch the movie.
I know the plot, and I know how it ends.
Yeah, well, it talks about like not religion as literal truth, but emotional truth. And those three experiences made me reconsider, because for a long time, I think you talked about this, I'll let you talk about it. I was like an edgy red atheist, literally owned a fedora and everything.
Just stroking your chin. Curious.
My lady. But it allowed me to recontextualize it, because I think you hit the nail on the head. And I know this is somewhat of a signature of my podcast. I ramble to make a question.
So
but
where the best questions come from, man.
As I said, many a time, the Xanadu review is for the ADHD community. But I feel like the 19th and 20th century were all about these grand narratives, and like liberalism, fascism, and communism were what arose to deal with this crisis of meaning, of modernity, where like all these traditional societal ways of looking and dealing with the world and other people, and they all try to deal with something. And fascism crashed out first. I will like to say, controversial opinion, the Xanadu review is officially hardline against fascism. Communism also did not work out, and now it feels like liberalism is kind of crashing out, and these perennial meanings that are beyond just the material, because you can explain these things materially, but that doesn't tell you why. Like you could, as you were talking about, you could optimize the perfect way on paper to live your life and have your relationships, or how to buy things, but it doesn't tell you why. So and
oftentimes it doesn't even work. The optimization doesn't
provide
the proposed result.
We're much more unhappy, much more depressed, etc. So clearly there's a desire for something else. And especially I feel like with the left, you say what you will about wokeness, it is a very religious movement of trying to reassert a certain sense of moral clarity. So I'm curious to your thoughts on that, because you talked about your experience of this and like the movie The Norseman, in the same way to me that like, at least to me, it rhymed with my experience of the movie The Life of Pi and like re-enchantment.
Yeah, I mean, so just a quick background. Like, I grew up Catholic. Went through first communion, confirmation, all that stuff. But I never like was into it. I went to church because I was told to. It was like a fight every week whether or not I was going to go. Like, the big reward was we would go to 7-Eleven after church and get a donut. Like that was like kind of my
Importance for me. I grew up in Canada, but it's almost 1-to-1.
Exactly. But so, I get confirmed and I go off to college, and it's like I don't go to church. I don't think about it. I have no interest in it. It's like an afterthought to me. I think the phrase I used in the essay was like it felt like a piece from earlier in my life, like the Ninja Turtles or something like that. It's like, what relevance could it have now, And then I just kind of had these experiences over the course of like 10 years. And it started with a comedy podcast where Pete Holmes, his podcast, You Made It Weird, which, like, by the way, his show Crashing on HBO is really good. I think the way I describe my comedy career to people, it's like Crashing, but if it just never got better. Like he just stays at all the shitty shows and never opens for, John Mulaney at Town Hall or whatever. But anyway, it was on Pete Holmes' podcast, You Made It Weird. He would occasionally have, religious thinkers on there. And he had this guy named Alexander Shahai who wrote a book. The title is escaping me right now, but it was basically about how the 4 gospels represent the 4 stages of the hero's journey. And it was like the first moment where I realized, like, oh, there's something deeper going on in the Bible and like in the Gospels and in the stories and in the parables. Like, that's interesting. I should keep my ear out, and like it could help me in my life, And then I would just encounter random bits of scripture throughout my life, and it would just hit me at the right moment. It would ring that tuning fork in my chest, and I would perk up and pay attention to it. And, I spent a lot of time, again, at the same time, while this is happening, that kind of millennial track that I was talking about, where it's like, just, do these things, optimize these data points, and your life will get better and you'll be happy. Like that was not bearing fruit. Right. So I like kind of these 2 parallel paths of like, here's what's not working. And then here's this stuff that keeps popping up that really like makes me feel whole, right? And so I start gravitating more towards the stuff that makes me feel whole. And like the what really drove it home for me was the movie The Northman, where there's a scene at the beginning where it's like these berserker warriors doing a dance around a fire, right? And they're chanting and they're growling and they're beating their chests, and it's like a ritual where they turn into bears before battle, right? And it's like, do they actually turn into bears? Of course not. Like, they're still men when it's over. But like in their minds, because they've enacted this ritual and believed it so fully, they think they're bears. They act like bears. And because of that, they, or maybe it's wolves that they turn into, but it's some kind of ferocious
Wolves
beast.
makes
right?
more sense.
Yeah, wolves. It's like they turn into wolves. But because they feel that way, they fight harder in battle. They're fearless, and they just charge ahead and they just like destroy the enemy. So because they accepted this like untrue subjective experience, it impacted the objective reality and like their outcomes, right? So that was like, it really kind of connected the dots of like, these aren't just necessarily only stories or morals. They can have like tangible impacts on your life. And it took a couple of years after seeing the movie for that to really sink in. And it's like, all right, I need more of this in my life. And it's like, maybe I'll just go back to church, right? Maybe I'll go back for one weekend, see how it feels, whatever, right? So my wife's out of town one weekend. She's on a work trip. I go, and feels really good. All right, maybe I'll go back next week. And then 4 days later, we found out my wife was pregnant. So it's like, well, I guess I should probably keep going back to church, So that's what really drove it home for me. And I've only missed, that was last November. I've missed one weekend since then when we were on vacation. So it's been a great experience. I love going back. I love hearing the stories. I love hearing Bible verses I never knew existed. And it just like drives home a point, like that's something that I always knew and understood, but couldn't articulate. It's like kind of the best parts of, that's what makes literature and movies and art so good, where it just brings something to life that you kind of knew but couldn't say. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it right now, and pushing forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it makes me think of there's a quote by the late Christopher Hitchens, who was like, one of the, sacred patron saints of the, the red edgy atheists.
Mhm.
But even he said to be ignorant of Christianity is to be ignorant of Western civilization, because
Yeah, it's the foundation for everything. It's
on
like,
on a like liturgical level, as well as like storytelling. Because to me, I would, if you haven't read it, I would really recommend the book Dominion by Tom Holland, where he talks about, and it's a history book, but it's a very readable, popular history book where he talks about the history of Christianity and also Judaism, because especially in the early days, they are one and the same. Because interestingly enough, Michael, my dad has a master's degree in early biblical history, and a lot of people don't know this, but for like the first 150 to 200 years of Christianity, it was basically like a Jewish sect. So to understand the history of the Old Testament and Judaism and Christianity are one and the same. I really like it because he doesn't just do like the the Reddit debunking thing, and he's not because I don't believe that Tom Holland is religious himself, but he takes a lot of respect looking at the source material. And at least to me, what I got out of it is like, okay, some of this stuff is historically verifiable in the Bible or the Torah, but some of it is not. But he's very understanding and sympathetic towards it, where he's like, this is myth that helped people understand the world that they lived in and made the world they lived in make sense to them. Because to me, like, I don't know about you, but the book of Job in particular was something that I struggled with so much, even as a child, of like, why would God essentially torture his best follower to win a bet? And maybe this is me talking from my because I grew up in the Church of Christ tradition, which is like a Protestant American evangelical, where it's not explicit, it goes back and forth, but it's a stone's throw away from like the earth is 6,000 years old, the Bible is literal. And you could probably speak to this better. I understand the Catholic tradition is not always the Bible is literal, but if you understand the book of Job in the context that it was written of, this is a much older myth from like ancient Sumeria, where like the ancient Hebrews put their spin on it, and like as a way of both understanding why suffering exists and understanding that like you don't do the right thing because you think you are going to get rewarded. You do the right thing because it's the right thing. And when I like recontextualizing these things outside of just the literal, like the book of Job in particular for me was one of those things like, oh, not only does this make sense, this has like a great spiritual meaning to me now, even though like I'm still not quite a Christian, I'm still not quite going to church. It makes more sense and I understand it more, because it's not just literal.
And there's like a wider frame of reference. It's something another like movie that kind of comes up when I talk about this stuff is, you ever see a Boiler Room with like Giovanni Ribisi and Ben Affleck, and it's like about stockbrokers.
Speak on it though.
So it's a movie about stockbrokers, and like they run a Ponzi scheme. It's kind of a precursor to Wolf of Wall Street, but Ben Affleck has like one or two scenes in the movie where he like is doing training for the new stockbrokers, and like his big speech is like, he tells them like, act as if you're the CEO of the company, act as if you drive a Maserati, act as if, and it just changes the way you carry yourself, and that changes your outcomes, right? And so like where I kind of fall on like, is this literal? Did it happen? And I can't, I just have to throw my hands up and say I don't know, but I'm going to act as if it did. And follow these things as if like, adhering to these rules and these traditions will make my life better. Like that's where my faith kind of comes in, right? I can't explicitly answer like, is this literal or not? Why would this happen? It's like I just have to say I don't know, and just kind of progress forward as if it's like 100% the real deal.
My outside, and again, like I'll claim, like I was raised in the church. I know the Bible very well. And I don't know if there is a Christian sect or Jewish sect or religious in general that speaks to this, but like I don't believe that the Bible or the Torah or even the Quran for that example is literally true. But I do believe that there is something that is very real, the divine, something greater than ourselves. Because to harken back to my edgy atheist, Redditor days, there's a quote from like the creator of South Park that like, of all the theories that exist about the origins of the universe, the silliest one of all time is the atheist one. Like, it just started happening for literally no reason, and it's just
it was
whatever.
the size of a head
Just
of a
'cause.
pin, then it
Yeah.
exploded, and it's like, where did that
For no
come from?
reason, and
I
it
don't
came
know.
out of it came out of nowhere for no reason. But to me, like, the divine is something that is real in the minds of humans, and mortality just like we probably physically cannot understand. And like,
No,
was there a-
it's literally incomprehensible. Like there's
Yeah.
no.
Well-
I saw a tweet recently that was like, you'll burn your eyes out. Like, we're 90 million miles away from the sun. You'll burn your eyes out if you stare at the sun. You think you could like stand in the presence and comprehend the being or the force that made the sun? Like, do you like?
Yeah. Well, that's something that makes sense to me, because like the two examples that always come to mind for me are the example of God appearing to Moses as a burning bush. Like, if you like, it's a bush that's on, and again, if you're doing the Reddit atheist, wow, it's a bush that's on fire, but it's not burning. Actually, well, maybe it didn't actually catch on fire yet, and just the leaves are burning. But like, okay, this is somebody who lived like 4,000 years ago, a Bronze Age sheep herder, who has no way of describing. This is something that I can't explain and I can't describe. And like, the important part is not literally the burning bush. It is the message that comes from it. The other side of it is the angels of, be not afraid.
Mhm.
And the early depictions of angels are like gears within gears. That's something that like a Bronze Age farmer cannot describe, cannot conceptualize. So like, he or she finds a way to make it make sense in a cultural context while still making the message make sense. And again, like,
so
ahead,
you know what happened? I was last New Year's 2024. I was driving back from Vegas to Los Angeles with my wife and some friends, and like we're driving through the desert, and we're like an hour outside of LA, and there's, I don't know what mountain range it is or what formation, but it's like we're in the desert, then there's clouds like kind of off in the distance, and then there's mountains rising above the clouds with snow caps, and it looks like the mountains are in the clouds. So like, imagine you're just like some, I don't even know what archaeological era it is, like some Neolithic person just on the plains, and you see that, and you just got to be like, oh, that's where the person that made the sun lives, clearly, because that has to be where they live, right?
Sense.
Yeah, so it like I was awed by the majesty of what I saw, and I had a frame of reference for it. But like, imagine you just have nothing and it's there.
Well, it's kind of like, the Midwit meme, right?
Oh, dude, I love the Midwit meme.
So, so like for the audience, and the small case who you haven't seen, it's like, the low IQ person and this high IQ person will come to the same conclusion. The low IQ person, through intuitive understanding of the world, when the high IQ person will like understand it deeply and come to the same conclusion. Or the midwit will like get caught up, lost in the sauce, so to speak. Because to me, the example that always strikes me is like, say you live in like 13th century France. Like, if you leave out a bucket of milk in the sun, there will be small little fairies or gremlins that will come in and turn the milk sour. Is that literally true? No, there's gremlins / fairies don't exist. But microbiome, microbacteria will come in and curdle the milk and turn it sour. Your intuitive understanding of this is the exact same as if you had the scientific understanding. You don't necessarily need to know the deep scientific understanding, which is not to say like you don't need to know that and you should act like a peasant. But I think there is something to be said for, as you were talking about, this perennial understanding, where like, if you get too caught up in the specifics and the scientific explanation, the disenchantment, like you miss the forest through the trees, and you miss what the actual important information is.
Instinct goes a long way. Like if it's just something that you feel in your chest, if it's revealed to you on your walk, sometimes like that's the best course of action.
You, it seems like many a religion has been founded essentially, when something was revealed to somebody in a walk. But I feel like,
Don't trust any thoughts while you're sitting down or indoors. That's a Nietzsche thing, I think.
and say what you will about him, but he had some good intuition here and there.
Yeah, he was the man. History's greatest incel, I think. That's either him or Isaac Newton, but probably Nietzsche.
There's a lot of great historical incels, but he's definitely in the top 10. But we are getting close to the end of our time here. So, Peter, I really appreciate you coming on. Do you have any closing thoughts before we get into plugs and promotions?
Oh man, I was gonna say, yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a blast to get back on the mic. Like I said, it's been almost 2 years since I've done a podcast, so I
You're
forgot
back
how
in
much
the saddle very successfully.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, final thoughts. What a world we live in. I don't know this. I got nothing.
No, that's good. So yeah, plugs, promotions. What do you got coming up? You just did something for the Metropolitan Review. That was really great.
Yeah, thanks, man. That was the Bill Burr piece. That was exciting. That's like my first time being like published anywhere outside of like my own Substack. So pretty pumped about that. Yeah, really nothing to plug other than my own Substack, Diary of a Failed Comedian. By the time this comes out, I might be on like self-imposed paternity leave. That's kind of one thing I'm like, my wife is due at the end of July. So I'm taking August off of work. So I'll probably take it off of like creative work as well, just to like focus on the family stuff.
Smart.
But what I'm looking forward to, honestly, is like, because now I have all these pieces of my life, right? I have my job, I have my writing, I have like, diet and exercise, time with my wife, all that stuff. And I have it like set up in pieces and like it all works together, right? But then this kid comes in and that's the new priority. And now I have to kind of reconfigure the pieces of my life and see how they fit together and work kind of around this new arrival. So I'm interested to see like how different things are going to be for me. Like, once we get into the fall, it should be interesting, but going to keep writing. It's been a real blessing the last year and a half after being done with comedy. Like I've gotten a lot of joy and, excitement out of just like participating in Substack and like meeting people like, like you. And it's been great, man. So I'm excited to keep it up no matter what challenges come my way.
Well, that's great. And I would like to say congratulations for you. My little sister is about to have her first kid right around the same time. So no kids for me yet, but I plan on being a very involved uncle. So
my brother just had a baby. So, fun uncle is also the shit. It's the way to go.
I feel like in a lot of ways I have like very fun but involved uncle energy,
I've seen that bookcase you have with like the katana on top, right? Is that
I do
real?
have it is real. I have the and I'll do this anecdote and we'll end on that. So I bought not as much these days, but a couple years back, I live in a state where weed is legal, so it's kind of high. And I bought Glamdring, which is Gandalf's sword for Lord of the Rings. It's like, okay, well, I got to put it on a stand, and the stand came with it was two. It's like, okay, well, I can't just have one sword if there's I got to do another one. So I bought a katana.
It's like tattoos, man. You can't get just one. You're just gonna be collecting swords soon enough.
You can take the the nerd out of the Reddit r-atheism subreddit, but you can't take the r-atheism subreddit out of the nerd.
Hell yeah, dude.
So all that having been said, I would like to say, Peter, this has been a great time. We'll have to do something again sometime whenever you're done with paternity leave. But I always like to do one ending question with every guest. So what is something that makes you feel, hopeful for the future? Or, if you don't have anything, what's something that would make you feel hopeful?
I think something that makes me feel hopeful for the future, there does seem to be a big push to like kind of bring books back. There's a lot of talk around like how to get men to read more, like what kind of books are men interested in. I think there's a lot of great books coming out of Substack. Like right now I'm reading John Pastelli's Major Arcana. So I think that like in an era that is built around short form content, there seems to be a real wide open lane for like books and real literature for those who crave it and seek it.
Well, I think that is a great note to end on. Well, Peter, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been a great time.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. Have a good one. Bye.